Hello and welcome to part 2 of 6 for the EPC and Frontiers Missions 21, Training Strategy for Cross-Cultural Mission Work in the 21st Century. Today, we'll be looking at highlights from a book called When Helping Hurts, using its wisdom to reflect back on our 7 years at Hospital Loma de Luz in Honduras, and extrapolating forward to the EPC and Frontiers future with E2025 and beyond. We hope you'll find it to be enjoyable, liberating, and thought-provoking. Let me begin by saying that Christians have a clear responsibility to help the poor. 40% of the world today lives on less than $2 per day. Much of the United States, including our church, is self-centered, complacent, and materialistic. The U.S. isn't doing enough. It is the richest nation ever, and with wealth comes responsibility. But some well-intentioned helping is actually hurting. Let me tell you a story about two animals, elephant and mouse. Elephant and mouse were best friends. One day, Elephant said, "Mouse, let's have a party." Animals gathered from near and far. They ate, they drank, they sang, they danced. And no one celebrated more and danced harder than Elephant. After the party was over, Elephant exclaimed, "Ah, Mouse, did you ever go to a better party? What a blast!" But Mouse did not answer. "Mouse, where are you?" Elephant called. He looked around for his friend and then shrank back in horror. There at Elephant's feet lay Mouse. His little body was ground into the dirt. He had been smashed by the big feet of his exuberant friend Elephant. "Sometimes that is what it is like to do missions with you Americans," the African storyteller commented. "It is like dancing with an elephant." By definition, short-term missions have only a short time in which to achieve predefined goals. Projects become more important than people. The wells need to be dug, 50 people must be converted, got to give the church back home a good report, and got to prove the time and the expense was well worth it. Individual drive becomes more important than respect for elders, for courtesies, for taking time. We end up dancing like elephants. We dance hard, and we have big feet. Short-term mission teams have often seen poverty as a deficit. So they have brought in knowledge, holiness, and stuff. They have at times seen development as a 2-week project, not as a lifelong process. They have at times seen locals as inept or lazy. But there's a very important principle of missions that we're forgetting. And it's just this: people and processes are more important than projects and products. So it is more important to greet people than to get Employee of the Month for our hard mission work. Latino, Asian, and African cultures are relationship-driven and not project-driven. They're community-focused and not individual-focused. And sometimes, our short-term missions are hurting those communities. Listen to this story from a Latino worker. "My Latino staff leads weekly Bible studies with students in low-income communities. After a short-term mission comes in to one of these communities, the children stop attending our Bible studies. They stop coming because we do not have all the fancy materials and crafts that the short-term mission teams have, and we don't give away things like these teams do. Our staff just isn't as interesting or creative or rich as the Americans that come on those teams." 30% of American short-term mission teams go to Mexico. A larger percentage go to Central America and the Caribbean. We often leave messes behind. We can unintentionally be missionary litterbugs. Few pastors will speak up or reject short-term mission offers to help, even if inside they resent the paternalism and humiliation of being directed by a group which many times doesn't speak the language, know the congregation, or even understand the community in which they work. A congregation struggling to learn to depend on the Lord and be a light in its own community can find it easy to surrender its responsibility and needs to a wealthy group which is more anxious to assume these responsibilities. The initiative of the congregation to meet its God-given opportunities and duties can be squelched by well-meaning outsiders. We can often lose sight of God's forest for the trees we are intent on cutting down. Think about it. If someone from Switzerland said to my small church in rural Georgia, "You can choose between our sending 13 people this summer to help with your VBS or our giving you the $25,000 it will cost to send the team," we would definitely take the money. We would use the $20,000 to finish off the church edition we've been working on for 5 years, and the remaining $5,000 would nearly double our normal VBS budget, so we could have a dynamic VBS as well. It's not that we wouldn't appreciate the cultural exchange and fellowship, but we have more pressing priorities for the long-term well-being of our church. Why did Jesus come to earth? Modern evangelicals have typically said he came so that we can go to heaven, and that social action is not central to the gospel. But Jesus came to bring the kingdom of God. Paul said that he came to reconcile all things to himself. Jesus said, "I am the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. I'm using my power to fix everything that sin has ruined. I'm bringing healing to my cosmos." Paul and Jesus defined a broader goal than saving us from burning in hell. People disagree about the causes of poverty. Conservatives will say that it's from personal failures, that it stems from laziness and lack of drive, or from sin and bad choices. Liberals will tell you that it's from broken systems, laws that don't allow justice, economic systems that don't allow opportunities to succeed. When Helping Hurts says that poverty is the result of broken relationships with God, with oneself, with others, and with the world. Poverty is simply one of the things that happens when those relationships are broken. Thus, all of us are poor. That is, we all have brokenness in our relationships. Polls of the North American Church show that it sees poverty as the absence of physical features like food, money, clean water, medicine, or housing. But a poll of more than 60,000 of these poor in the majority world show that they see poverty as the presence of psychological features like shame, "I have nothing to take to the party," inferiority, "Oh, I'm not good enough to go," powerlessness, I don't have a ride, I can't get there," depression, I'm too sad to go," social isolation, "I don't have anyone to go with," voicelessness, "No one wants to listen to me." If we believe that poverty is due to ignorance, then we will educate the poor. If we believe it's due to oppression, then we'll work for social justice. If it's due to personal sin, then we'll evangelize and disciple the poor. And if it's due to material deficiency, we will give things to the poor. Does it matter? Well, the North American Church has focused on material deficiency. If it is correct, then its mission effort may be helping. But if it's wrong, if poverty is a result of broken relationships that leave the poor feeling ashamed, inferior, and powerless, then coming in like Santa Claus can just further these feelings, penalizing work where the poorest may get the most, undermining families where the dad may just disappear, creating dependence where the work ethic may suffer. To help people without hurting them, we must distinguish between short-term relief and long-term development needs. If not, we will cause dependence through paternalism from forcing adults into children's roles. Paternalism is doing for people what they can do, but just won't do themselves. Through resources, by giving them stuff. Holiness, by taking their pulpits. Knowledge, by teaching their classes. Labor, by doing their work. And management, by taking charge of their projects. Paternalistic, dependence-causing missions have several dangerous and unspoken assumptions. Assumption 1. We don't need to take charge, just wait. The North American will do it. Assumption 2. North Americans run things. And Assumption 3. If we let the North Americans run things, they'll bring more stuff later. Here are the relief and development rules of thumb. 1. Make relief seldom and immediate. Example: we just had a 7.2 earthquake, please come and help. Okay, That's relief. Don't give relief when development is called for. When North American churches give money to churches and projects, it almost always dooms the project and the church. Go into a community looking at all they have, not all that they lack. Wow, how cool is this? So what's your dream? And what's your next step? 4. Participate together. Multicultural participation is a legitimate end in and of itself. What's worth doing for God is worth doing well. The church spends nearly $2 billion a year on short-term mission trips. Over 2 million people a year go on these trips, which has increased from 100,000 in 1990. 50% of these trips are for a time frame of less than or equal to 2 weeks. There are plenty of arguments in defense of short-term mission trips. One is that $2 billion a year is being used for missions where it probably wouldn't otherwise. Sadly, this may be true. Another argument is that these short-term mission trips will increase mission giving in general. But the church really hasn't seen an increase in mission giving since 1990. There's an argument that says that they produce more long-term missionaries, but there's been no change in that since 1990 either. Short-term mission trips develop profound relationships. Well, that might be true, but there's very little contact between the team and the locals after the trip. So what are we saying? That we should just chuck short-term missions in general? Well, no, but we can definitely do better. To improve short-term missions, we need to understand the nature of poverty and come alongside a team who understands poverty. We need to go to be rather than go to do. We should go as learners, not as saviors or workers. We should go to develop relationships and to avoid paternalism. We should keep team numbers small or be open to not sending a team at all. Don't go to shop, tour, have fun, or go on an adventure. Consider changing the name from short-term mission to training, and ask if the money is worth the experience. Don't suggest all serious-minded Christians or mission supporters need to do short-term missions. Take only seriously involved church members. Make training required before, during, and after the trip. Require every short-term mission member to pay for at least some of his trip. Consider donating to the mission the same amount that the trip cost. And now some practical questions. Have you, your family members, and/or your church participated in short-term mission trips? Did you perform community development or disaster relief? Do you think any of your helping hurt? Will the mission you visited someday be independent of foreign support? Sometimes North American churches experience compassion fatigue, deciding those people just don't deserve help, after repeatedly taking gifts to families where the dad disappears when they come. How might such churches actually be contributing to the family's problems? What might such churches do to improve their service? What have you learned about missions through this week's reading? What have you learned about yourself as a missionary Christian? Thank you for joining us today. We hope you'll join us again next time for Part 3 of the Missions 21 training. This is Amanda Rumbaugh, signing off.